What's up everybody, raid testing back on the menu, and today we're taking a look at heroic The Eye of the Jailer in the new raid Sanctum of Domination. Keep in mind this is not a guide on how to do the fight, as it is very early testing. Things will change, some things aren't working properly, so this is merely to give y'all a taste of what to expect. So yeah, The Eye of the Jailer, keeping us from grinding Stygia, which we all love to do. So again, 3-phase fight, alternating between phase 1 and 2 with a combo of 2 phases in the end. Phase 1 you fight the big eyeball, phase 2 you fight the big eyeballs. With that said, let's take a look at it. Starting off with phase 1. Main mechanic for this phase is the Stygian abductors. The eye will summon an abductor that chains a random non-tank player and any player within a few yards once it goes off. The abductor then tries to pull chained players off the platform, being less effective when trying to pull more players. Seem to cap out at a total of 5 players. So pretty much a player gets a circle around him, few seconds later the chain hits. If that player is alone, the abductor will eventually drag him off the platform. But if enough players get chained and run away from the platform, you will instead drag the abductor down to you. This ad needs to be tanked and will use a sailing lance on its target, dealing a large amount of physical damage and a bleed that lasts for 10 seconds. Again, it was fairly undertuned during testing, but if tuned up, you'll need to nuke it down fast. On top of this, the eye will eyebolt random targets every now and then, dealing a chunk of shadow damage. Just heal for it. At 100 energy, the eye will cast Annihilating Glare. A large beam going from the boss across the platform will go from either left to right or vice versa. If you get hit by it, you take lethal shadow damage and you get knocked back. So even if you survive the beam, you might die by getting knocked off instead. To counter this, at the very end of the left and right side of the platform, there are harpoons which you can use to grapple across to avoid getting hit by this. Now, for the tank mechanic, we have Deathlink. The Eye of the Jailer inflicts a large amount of physical damage to its current target, and the final damage taken will chain to 9 more players. If tuned correctly, could be a fun mechanic, as you'll have to try to take as little damage as possible to not screw over the raid. While testing, it was extremely undertuned and did pretty much no damage at all. Now at 75, 50 and 25% you will enter phase 2. Eye of the Jailer will eject a Rotseek and Slothseeker eye and cloak itself in a Stygian shield, and you can't poke the main eye anymore. Now the Rot and Slothseeker eyes will each spawn on separate sides of the platform near the harpoons. These ads needs to be tanked 30 yards apart, or you will cast Suffering every 3 seconds. Suffering deals a large amount of raid-wide shadow damage and leaves a stacking debuff that increases shadow damage taken by 20%, which lasts for a minute. On top of this, they also need to die roughly at the same time. When only one eye is alive, they will cast Suffering every 8 seconds. Rot and Sloth will also cast Slothful Corruption and Spreading Misery on random targets. Slothful Corruption, a dispellable debuff that lasts for 21 seconds, deals ticking shadow damage and reduces cast, attack, and movement speed by 40%. Spreading Misery debuffs a random target, deals ticking shadow damage, and upon expiration spawns a pool of misery on the floor that deals damage if you stand in it. Now, the Eye of the Jailer will also use a few abilities during this phase: Titanic Death Gaze, Desolation Beam, and Soul Shatter. Death Gaze, raid-wide AoE damage. Just heal. Desolation Beam targets a random player, dealing a bit of shadow damage and cascades to a target within 8 yards, increasing in damage with each jump. Targeted player gets a circle around them, few seconds later it goes off. And Soul Shatter. Now the tooltip says a surge of soul energy inflicts X shadow damage to the target and splits their soul in 3. However, while testing, this was just a swirl on the ground, and if you got hit by it, your soul got split into 3. So I'm unsure how this is intended to work, if it's a targeted cast or if it's just a swirl on the ground. Either way, these souls deal damage to the target that spawned them and reduces damage, healing, and movement speed until the target joins with their soul. However, while testing, you could also just run away from them and they despawn, so again, unsure how that will end up. When you defeated Sloth and Rotseeker, phase 1 begins again. After you've done phase 2 3 times and boss is at 25%, phase 3 begins. Boss will now use Immediate Extermination, which is the debuff you get in the maw. Every 6 seconds, your healing healing taken will be reduced by 10% and the boss gains 50% attack speed and deals raid-wide shadow damage. So kill boss before you get healing immune. I will also use Desolation Beam and Soul Shatter from phase 2 in this phase. And that's pretty much it. All in all, it's a fun fight for the most part, nothing overly complex, but seeing as it's the second boss in the raid, I wouldn't expect it to be either. However, it was horribly undertuned. But that's usually the case on PTR, either overtuned like crazy or undertuned. I just hope they twist the tuning knob up a bit, because depending on tuning, it can make or break the fight. A lot of the mechanic looks fun, but if they're poorly tuned, you can just ignore them, which will make the fight a lot less fun. Like the tank mechanic, I did not have to think about it whatsoever. It barely went through any absorb I got from our disc priest. Like I had a 6k absorb and no damage. But again, I'm gonna assume it will be tuned way up. I also hope they change it so you can't blink or immune the big beam that sweeps across the encounter space at 100 energy. Since at the moment, pretty much everything worked. Night Fae blink, Mage blink, Venter TP, you could turtle it, Transcendence, Demonic Circle, etc, etc. So like more than half the raid can just ignore the mechanic. But that's just my opinion. I personally want to play the fight somewhat as intended, and the intention here is clearly to grapple across the platform, which is way more fun than just blink lol, since the beam doesn't happen that often. But yeah, all in all, still a very decent second boss of the new raid. Like I said, that's pretty much it for this first look. We'll cover all bosses on PTR, and proper guides will be out once the raid is released. I'm streaming all of our raid testing on PTR, so don't forget to check that out whenever there's raid testing announced. Otherwise, I am streaming all of our main progression once it's live on Mondays and Tuesdays. Now, if you have any questions at all about this encounter, hit me up in the comments or become a patron and get access to the Stankie Discord, where you can get help with anything raiding related. And don't forget the usual stuff like comment, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.